Well, happy Saturday, folks. The real Captain Kirk here. We're live from One Bethlehem Plaza here in downtown Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Hard to believe, only a day and a half left of 2023. Been away for a couple weeks. Took the girls down to their tropical paradise in the Bahamas. Again, it's always funny to see how locals respond to the weather here. And so down in the Bahamas, it was actually, while we were there, it was the coldest in over 40 years. Again, mid to high 60s, 70s rather, but again, by their standards, frigid. And so they were freezing. Interesting to see the Canadians who thought it was actually quite hot. So again, everything's perspective. And when you're 7, even 77-degree water temperature, and if your dolphin's name is Stormy, you're happy as a little pig and poo here. So the little girl was very happy to swim with her dolphin. We do have Weather Trends 360/planner. If you want to check out your perfect weather, you can pick, again, if we pick the Bahamas, we'd say 80 and sunny, and the top 3 weeks will project in the year ahead. So neat vacation planning tool if I haven't checked that out yet. Again, obviously, we had a warm Christmas as expected here. Again, so here in the U.S., we're showing the November through January trends year on year. So those red bars are much, much warmer than last year. Again, very, very warm Christmas compared to the frigid conditions a year ago. And now kind of a cooler trend, still a bit above average, but much cooler trend, more favorable seasonal sales here going into January. So again, blue line is national min temps for U.S., and the red line is national max temps for the U.S. So again, improving trends for seasonal sales that got pretty hammered pretty hard here for Christmas period. If we look at the Polar Vortex, we see some good news here. It's very symmetrical. When it's strong and symmetrical, you don't have a lot of polar movement. Polar air stays at the pole where it belongs, but we see it breaking apart here. So again, it looks to get weaker, ragged, and see a big intrusion here in the U.S. We'll see how long this will last, but it looks like the second week in January, and if this is a sign of a pattern change. One sign of a pattern change for sure is just the El Nino. We are definitely peaked here. It's pretty much at its peak, strongest point, and now plummeting according to models and the subsurface water data. So it's, again, peaked, and now we're going to head to actually rapid change. This is kind of crazy how fast this change will be. These models are projected to be correct. Would be La Nina by early summer. So that has huge implications on our 2024 outlook here. And again, lots of severe weather here with this clashing jet streams, polar, subtropical jet streams, changing climate cycles. So again, it's going to be an interesting 2024 for sure. Making some improvement here in the drought phase. We're still the least in 4 years, about 54% of the country in dry phases versus 49% average. This will continue to improve. All that drought there in the plains and the southern tier of the U.S. is probably going to be gone by spring with a strong subtropical jet stream. We look at season-to-date snowfall here through today here, way down. This was kind of expected. Again, it's way down in the Sierras. Sierras are down to 80-90% compared to the epic December snow they had last year. So way below normal in the Sierras. So it may look like a lot, but again, not that much. And in fact, here in the U.S., 62% less than last year, 59% below average, make it the number one least 30 September through 30 December snowfall trend here in the U.S. Current snow cover kind of depicts the same general trend here. Here today, about 22% of us have snow on the ground, not much, versus 34% last year. And you just notice the heavy, heavy snowpack in the Sierras and the West last year, and not as extreme this year. So again, least snow cover in 12 years here for today, and second least in 20 years. Recapping last week here, as expected here. Again, this is not uncommon with El Ninos. You tend to be warm and wet, and that's certainly what we had here in the U.S., about 4.6 warmer than last year, warmest in 26 years, second warmest in 38, so much above average there. 50% wetter, wettest in 3, seventh wettest in 38, so pretty wet for sure. Big storm up the East Coast. Snowfall way down, 23% versus a year ago, least in 31 years, second least in 38 years. Wall-to-wall warm, coast-to-coast warm there in Canada, number one hottest in 38 years. So hot, wet was the general theme across the world. If we look at this week here, again, signs of that pattern shift a bit. Again, seeing kind of a typical El Nino here with the cooler weather in the southeast mid-Atlantic. That's pretty typical. But for the U.S. overall, we're about 5.9 colder than last year, 15th warmest in 38 years. So an improving trend here. This is definitely an uptick in seasonal sales that got hammered pretty hard here during the very, very warm pre-Christmas period. Snowfall still way down, 83% less than last year, number one least in 38 years. So snow accessories are going to continue to suffer here. Probably going to see some uptick here with some potential couple big blizzards up the East Coast as we get into January, February, even to early March. So some hope for clearing out those snow accessories as we go for the latter half of winter here. Precip down 52% versus a year ago, driest in 3, 12th driest in 38 years. So again, some improvement on the temperature front for seasonal sales. We look at the 6-day snowfall outlook again, not much. Again, some light snow shower effects here in the northeast, but again, nothing particularly heavy. Sierras may actually get a foot-plus storm here next weekend, so there's hope here. Again, they're way, way below average, so they'll take it. If we look at next week, we start to see signs of that polar vortex. TBD if it heads toward the west first or more traditionally toward the central plains into the east. Either way, it does spread across the country as we go through that second week of January. So this cold will spread from west to east through the week. So starts warm in the east, but again, by the tail end of this week ending 13 January, much colder. 4 degrees colder than last year nationally, 16th warmest in 38 years, 164% more snow than last year, most in 4, still just a hair below average. And rainfall up 13%, wettest in 4 years, 13th wettest in 38 years. So we'll see if this is the sign of the change here that we expected a year ago for the January, February, early March timeframe. If we just aggregate these two-week outlook trends here through the 13th of January again, a little misleading again, that map of warm in Canada and the U.S. Again, those are very warm periods ahead of the cold fronts. There's a couple of them, and then gets much colder behind the cold fronts. So again, a little misleading. And if you look at the latter half of this period, again, much colder across Canada and the U.S. Precip versus average inset left. Again, this map here just kind of shows that's 14-hour outlook. You can see the cold air. Polar vortex spins down a little chunk into the U.S. as we get to the latter half of next week, actually week 7 through 13 January. And again, very frigid there in northern Europe, Moscow, Russia, central Siberia. If we look at the 2-week snowfall trends here again, so heavy snow there in eastern Canada. So even though it's mild, you can still have some snow. So eastern Canada looks to be a snowy spot, as the Moscow to central Siberia areas. Unfortunately, we do believe, and again, we published this to clients many months ago, but the clash of changing cycles and polar jet streams versus subtropical jet streams, crashing to La Nina. I mean, there's a lot of severe weather risk here for 2024. We have a winter storm, again, projecting the worst billion-dollar disasters in 7 years, 113% above average, 323% more than 2023. Very worried about hurricanes. Texas, South Florida, the 2 key risk areas. So Texas, you're overdue, and all cycles suggest you're going to take the big hits this year, as will maybe South Florida. So again, that's all we have to say about that for now. So again, a pretty bad severe weather season in 2024. Have a great week, folks, and we'll see you this time next week.